Yeah, my name is Kevin Pugh. I'm going to be starting my 14th year as the Dean of School Culture at Flagstaff Academy. It's a public charter school in the St. Vrain Valley School District. My background is in education and 2 decades plus in restorative justice, and have married those together at Flagstaff Academy. And I also train schools all around the country in restorative practices and education. I think the best way to describe restorative practices is by comparing it to what they're used to, which is typically a punitive approach. The punitive approach looks at when there's been a misbehavior or a wrongdoing, looks at 3 questions. Who did it? And then what punishment do they deserve? What was the violation? Of course. So what rule was broken? Who did it? And then what punishment do they deserve, right? The restorative approach looks at it through a relational lens and looks at 3 very different questions. We want to understand what happened from all the points of perspective, and we want to understand what the harm was or what the impact was from what happened. Once we understand that, then we can start to understand the needs and the obligations of everyone that was involved and come up with a plan to repair that harm to the greatest extent possible. So we aren't looking at blame and shame. We aren't looking at proving who was right and who was wrong, or getting testimony or witness statements about who started it and who didn't start it, things like that. We're looking at everyone who was involved, trying to understand what their involvement was, and then trying to have a collaborative process that's facilitated and helps the students or staff involved to come up with a plan for how to repair the harm to the greatest extent possible. You know, it's been quite a journey over 13 going on 14 years there, and the vision when we started, the principal there created this Dean of School Culture position for the purpose of shifting the school culture away from that punitive mindset and into a restorative mindset. He had a vision of the school becoming a fully restorative school. I don't know if any school can ever get there, but it's always the journey, right? And over the first 3 to 5 years, we saw really eye-opening success with that. When I first started there, the enrollment of the school was about 200, 250 students. We had just moved into a brand new campus, so we were ready to expand. And it was the perfect time to start rebuilding the culture on the new campus. The school averaged about 100 days of out-of-school suspension a year with only 200, 250 students. So it was the go-to, was sending kids out of school. And then they would come back and nothing had been changed. And the repeat offense was very high. And so we started making small changes, and over the first 3 years, putting restorative practices into the school and training our staff, we completely got rid of after-school detention, which had been filled every day of the week. And we brought the suspensions down to an average of about 6 to 8 a year. And we dropped overall referrals by 83% in the school. So that really freed me up to approach my job differently, and we were able to build a character education program and social emotional learning program. Then I was able to go into classrooms, every grade level, once a week, every classroom for about 30 minutes, where we could then really start teaching students restorative practices, the values and the principles, the language, and the process. So the more they learned it, the more comfortable they became with it, and within another few years, it really became the water we swam in and the air we breathed in the school. You know, from a student perspective, one of the greatest benefits is they get a say in what the outcome is. They have control. They have a voice in the process, and their voice is just as important as anyone else's voice in the process. So they get to bring their strengths to the table. If it's a student who, let's say, did some vandalism in the school and that had a negative impact on the feel of the whole school community, but maybe this student has some special talent in art, they can bring that strength to the table and use that in their plan to repair the harm. And then the community sees them not just as the person who caused the harm, but as someone who brings a value to the school community, someone who is appreciated and respected for what they bring in a positive way. And instead of having this cloud hanging over their head for, oh, that's the student who did X, Y, Z, they can reclaim their good reputation by now being known as the student who, oh, that's the student who fixed this and made our school better. Look at their artwork, or look at, whatever it was they did, just as an example. And so it recognizes that when a student causes harm in a school community, they are also harmed themselves. Their reputation is harmed. And it's hard to get out from under that unless you have an opportunity to do something to repair the harm. And not only feel better about it yourself, but know that the school is seeing you as the person who repaired the harm and made the community better. And that's directly in line with some of the indigenous roots of restorative practices. In native cultures that would use restorative practices, the Sioux Nation in particular, would do a renaming process as part of their reintegration, that when someone from their tribal community went on a quest and came up with a vision of how to repair harm to the community and then executed that plan, repaired the harm, they were then welcomed back into the community and actually given a new name to recognize that they are no longer the person who is known as the harm causer, but now they're the person known as the one who strengthened the tribal community. And they were celebrated as they came back into the community. We're not giving students new names every time they repair the harm, but it's that same idea that we're reintegrating them back into the community as a member in good standing with our school, instead of a student who's always going to be looked at as, oh, let's wait and see what problem they're going to cause next or what trouble they're going to cause next. No, that's behind them now, and we're able to move on. And with our young people, we want them to learn that it's okay to make mistakes, that's how you learn. We want a school community that literally celebrates mistakes as, hey, this is an opportunity now for us to get better. We can support you in getting better from this mistake. We're not going to cast you aside because you made a mistake, right? And we had a math teacher who explained this really well. She was very resistant to it at first, partly from a logistical standpoint. She said, oh, I've got 57 minutes of math curriculum, and you're asking me to start my class with a connection circle that takes at least 10 minutes. So how am I going to get through that curriculum? And I encouraged her to just try it out for a while, and we supported her, and she used that consistently for a couple of weeks. And then she started to notice, wow, we're getting through this 57-minute block of curriculum in about 35 minutes now, with greater mastery by the students. And the sense of safety the students were displaying in the classroom was really what was making that happen. They were no longer afraid to raise their hand and say, Miss, I don't get this yet. Can we back up? Can we slow down? Can we go over this again? Can I work on this with a partner? Because I really want to get this. So they weren't afraid to raise their hand and say they didn't get it, or raise their hand and ask a question. They weren't afraid of it being seen as a dumb question or something like that, because the sense of community had gotten so much stronger through some of the preventative restorative practices like a connection circle, that then it was an okay place to make mistakes. It was an okay place to try things out that felt uncomfortable. It was an okay place to be messy in how you were doing it, and that's how they were learning better. And we saw academic measurable impacts from this across our school. When we started putting restorative practices in place in our school was ranked 651 out of all the middle schools in Colorado based on the Colorado School Performance Framework. Within 5 years, no other changes in our school other than restorative practices, we were ranked number 1 in the state. No curriculum changes, no instructional practice changes, just the change in our culture. And I really believe it has a lot to do with sense of belonging and sense of safety, and we've measured that in our school too.